Cam Robinson is the director of content for Elite Prospects. He joins us Tuesdays. How are you?
I'm doing well, fellas. How we doing?
Yeah,
Good.
very well. Exciting week here. We will start with your latest tweet on Brock Boeser. I do believe the Canucks are actively talking trade on Brock Boeser with a number of teams, but from my understanding, they haven't decided against keeping him for the playoffs. Still a chance they meet for one last extension discussions as well. This one seems too tough to guess at this point. Yeah, Cam, any update from there, my friend?
Nothing official. I'm told they haven't met to negotiate anything. I mean, it sounds like they haven't really been at the table in a while either. That, the reported last offer was 5 years at $8 million, and that was weeks ago, and it was rejected, unsurprisingly. This is his last big crack at a long-term contract, and if he goes to free agency, it's expected that he'll have, a number of teams very interested in offering him a 7-year deal, and then you can get a little bit of a bidding war, and maybe he ends up with 8.5 or something like that too over a 7-year deal. So I think his camp that they are very much open to staying in Vancouver and that they might take even a bit of a haircut on that term, maybe drop down to 7, maybe even drop down to 6 years if that cap hit makes sense for them long term. I think you would prefer to stay in Vancouver. But it's up to this point, the Canucks, they were pretty steadfast at, 4 or 5 years. And so we'll see if they want to move the needle up to 6 and if that gets it done. But, they've had all season and now we're down to just a couple of days. It would have to be one of these at midnight signings. I do know his name is out there, that teams are calling, Canucks are listening, they're open. Nobody's obviously offered something that's knocked their socks off or else the deal probably would have already done. But, everything comes back to this team wants to make the playoffs. They want playoff revenue. You trade Brock Boeser, that's going to diminish that unless you quickly take those assets and flip them for a player. So, like I said, I think all options are on the table. If I was betting, I would say that Brock's probably here past the deadline, and then we see what happens. The worst case scenario is he's here past the deadline. They don't make the playoffs, and then he just walks. That would be disastrous. But at least if he can if they can make the playoffs and he can maybe do a little something, maybe there's still some time to get that extension done before July 1. But at this point in time, it's too close to tell, I'd say.
The market for him, when you look at the comparables, Ryan Donato's got more goals and points, but doesn't have the pedigree, doesn't have the playoff pedigree that Brock Boeser has as well. I mean, he has to be at least on the podium for forward rentals this season. I mean, do you think the market is going to show up here for Brock Boeser and at least tempt the Vancouver Canucks?
If they decide to fully go with it and be like, okay, we're going to sell Boeser, I think that they should become sellers at that point. But I think that there should be a market for him. I mentioned it last week or the week before, is that I had talked to some teams and just kind of asking, like, what do you think the value would be on a Brock Boeser? And they, everybody kind of said, like, starts with a first round pick and then you look at a young player or a young prospect attached to that, or maybe it's a quality second round pick and a couple of good young players. Something we saw Jake Gensel go for last year, 4 prospects and a conditional first that turned into a second. Obviously, Gensel has a better resume than Boeser does, but we could look in that kind of realm too. If it's not a first, it's a second plus. So I do think there is a market for him, and I do think that if you can't get him, if you're not going to move on the term, and that's just a decision you've made in house that you're not comfortable paying this player deep into his 30s, then you absolutely have to probably just get the best that you can out of it. And now, if the best that you can get out of it is a 3rd round pick and a prospect, then I guess you can justify not doing that and hoping he has a good playoffs, and maybe you're convinced to move up and give him the 6 years. But I do think that, centers go first, right? The top rental centers, the top rental D, and then he would be the top rental winger on the market at this point. So yeah, I think
it might be a little armchair. Sorry, it might be a little armchair GM to say you trade Brock Boeser, you get futures, and then you use the futures to acquire something else. But we've seen proof. This administration has done this twice already. Yep. They don't seem too afraid of having future assets in their pocket for a day or two before they flip those assets around for something else. I mean, is it possible they could do something like that again?
Absolutely, it is. And like you said, specifically this management group has shown us, twice that they're able to do that. I just not reporting it whatsoever. I know that Alex Tuch name is out there. The Buffalo is open to moving him if the price is right. The price is high, but he's got a year left on his deal after this one at less than $5 million. Would they trade Boeser and then flip him for a guy like Alex Tuch, who a big body, skates really fast, can score, can play the middle, can play the wing, kind of fits Rick Tocchet's system of play. Looks like he'd be a good playoff performer. I haven't seen him since his Vegas days, but something like that, I could see them trying to pull off. Although the Sabres would probably want, rather than pure futures, because they have so many futures, they want more of a younger now piece, which Vancouver doesn't really have to give. So unless they can convince him on Nils Höglander or something like that. But yeah, I do think that is absolutely on the table. And I'm sure that they're considering that as they're getting those options and then talking to teams. Would you be interested in this or this that we could potentially get in a Boeser trade? So they're creative in that regard. I think it's all about winning now for this group and this ownership group. So that's why I think that the end of the day, I think Brock's probably still in Vancouver past Friday.
Do you think he makes sense in Florida? They've emerged here with all this cap space because of the Matthew Tkachuk injury.
Absolutely. And that would be a great pickup for them, to then have Tkachuk come back into the lineup and have Boeser as, a secondary scorer on that team, someone who has shown up in the playoffs. Be a great landing spot for him. If he did go there, I think that would be a really great spot for Brock. Florida, they don't have a ton of assets to move at this point in their evolution of their cycle, but they could probably put together a package that would be comparable to what some of these other teams might be looking at giving.
Dreger told us yesterday that he's hearing the Canucks are looking for a center with term and guys who haven't been on trade boards. Do you have any guesses there, Cam? And what do you think the odds are that, much like the Philip Roenick deal of a couple of years ago, we get hit with a thunderbolt here from a Canucks management group that surprises us with a name that hasn't been circulated?
Yeah, I'm hearing the same things, that they're not shopping for rentals, which makes a lot of sense, especially where this team is at this point in time. Is that if you're going to add, you'd probably want someone with term. So not reporting these names, that this is what I'm hearing they're looking at. But just spitballing with some people is that Michael Rasmussen, we know that they've had some interest in him in Detroit, big 6'6" forward. Played the middle of the ice a couple years ago, hasn't been playing a lot of it this year. Morgan Geekie, 6'3", right hand center, having a career year. He's an RFA this summer, but you still have team control on a player like that. Colton Sissons, another guy, a right-handed center, really good in the draws. He's got one more year at 2.85, something like that, if they're looking for more of those depth Cs. I don't think they're involved in Scott Lawton, who's kind of with the rental center market being pretty light this year, that a lot of teams are really interested in him. I think that probably ends up out east and maybe in Toronto, something like that. Dylan Cozens. Right, we know that they had some interest in Dylan Cozens with that Elias Pettersson rumored package coming back with Bowen Byram. I think that the Sabres they're open to moving him. That he hasn't been told like, hey, we're not moving you. We are part of our plans long term. That he could be moved this week. He's getting paid $7 million a year. He had that great year. He signed the big extension. Then he's kind of struggled. But so a new environment, a change of scenery could really unlock. Still really young, former top 10 pick. I think he went 7th overall. A really high character, and he does have a load of skill. So among kind of the younger players that have term down the middle, he's probably the most talented and would be like a really excellent fit long term for Vancouver. Because
why does he have his haters? What do you think the hating is about Dylan Cozens?
He's getting paid $7 million a year and he's not producing. And that's an easy target, right? But is he 24 yet even? He's still quite young. Yeah. Just turned 24, yeah. So I loved him as a prospect. I loved his quick evolution into the NHL. So I do think that there's untapped potential there yet, that this could still be a player that could consistently put up 60 plus points in NHL seasons and potentially end up being kind of like a matchup guy for you in all situations too. So, but what's that going to cost, right? Is that they're not going to give him away. They recognize his potential as well too, but something needs to give in Buffalo, and they recognize that this core is not working. And they have loads of young pieces and picks and prospects, and so they need to shift some things up, which is why they're listening on players like Cozens and Alex Tuch and potentially even JJ Peterka, which I think would be crazy to move off of him myself. But if anyone could pry him out of Buffalo, I think that'd be a steal.
And do you expect any of the smaller pieces of the Vancouver Canucks to go out the door? You mentioned Nils Höglander. I don't know that this
Suter, Susie.
Yeah, there's the UFAs and Forbert and stuff too. Do you think that they will pull the trigger or anything like that?
I was told that Carson Soucy is that like actively team and agent they're trying to facilitate something. I think that if that does happen, it'll happen, right close to the deadline as teams, miss out on better options. And they're like, okay, we still need depth. And, he has had a history of being a strong, bottom pairing guy who can chew up 15, 16 minutes a night and be physical and clear the net front. And so that's playoff hockey type of stuff. And so I do think a market might open up for a player like Soucy as we get closer to the deadline, even for just like a mid-round pick. If they weren't searching for a center, Pusuter, it's like that would make sense to parlay him, but their center is just so bleak, right? It's really light right now after the Miller trade. So I wonder if they just end up holding on to him. I think that they're looking to soft buy rather than soft sell, but we might actually see a bit of a combination of both, which I'd be okay with too, because it's a seller's market right now. And so for all these teams in the mushy middle, there's an opportunity to be had here to take some of your pieces on expiring deals, or even guys that have a little bit of term left, and getting a little bit above market value for them, because there's just so few assets on the table right now. And that's kind of why we're seeing it's a slow week thus far. In previous years, we've seen a lot of the deals made in the days leading up to the deadline, and then deadline day is quiet, and we still have a little bit of time, but it seems like it's pretty quiet out there right now.
Well, the Oilers pulling the trigger here today, maybe that sort of gets things going a little bit and lubricates the wheels. Canucks calling up Jonathan Lekkerimaki in exchange for Archie Baines. Do you think this is a long run here? This is just to spice things up, or do you think they say, you know what, we need goals, stay here for a few weeks, see what you can do?
They need goals. You nailed it, right? They are struggling to score goals, and this kid is a goal scorer. And so I've been saying it all year, is that you handle him with care. You bring him up, you put him into a spot to find success, hopefully, see if he can get rolling. If it falls off and the minutes drop off, boom, right back down to Abbotsford. But, if they can put him into a position to kind of jumpstart some things here, it's a lot to ask of a kid, but he does have that one-shot goal-scoring ability that they so sorely lack on this team right now, especially while Pettersson is seemingly allergic to shooting when he has open space. I think that they're willing to give him an extended leash in a promising position in the lineup until he proves he can't handle it.
Let me just ask you, Cam, getting back to 1 foot in, 1 foot out, do some selling, do some buying. Is that wise? Is there a case for punting on this season?
If I'm calling the shots and I have ownership's blessing, yes, I am. I'm not adding anything to this roster. I don't think that they have earned the right to be given the benefit of the doubt that they should be given help to finish this year off, versus a team like Columbus, who everybody projected to be in the bottom of the standings, and that they have proven all year long that they're capable of being in that playoff mix. And now you reward that by going, okay, we're going to sell some of our futures and give you guys a boost because of what you've done. Is that I think it's the opposite in Vancouver, and I absolutely would punt this year, but that's in a vacuum, right? You're not going to have ownership blessing. You're not looking to waste a heart level season from Quinn Hughes, right? But just everything has gone kind of against him, right? The Demko injuries, the Pettersson stuff, the Miller drama, like it doesn't seem like the magic is there right now to sacrifice anything. And I think that they recognize that too, which is why I say that they're looking to soft buy. And I think whatever pieces they're bringing in, anything can change in 10 minutes. But the pieces they're probably looking at aren't going to be real needle movers, but more depth pieces coming in, and then maybe a couple depth pieces going out, and you're just kind of shifting the deck a little bit.
Lastly, buddy, our Surrey Mitsubishi poll question. I'm sure you've seen what JT Miller is doing on Broadway. We're asking, did the Canucks trade the wrong guy?
It's a fair question. The guy's shooting 35% since he landed in New York, right? Like it's inflated. He's a good player, though. We know he's a good player, right? There's a reason he put up 99 points, 100-point seasons in Vancouver. He's a point-a-game guy. He's a good player, but he's also 31 years old, or will be, right? It's when you're faced with that decision between him and Pettersson, you had to consider long-term value. And I still cannot believe that a player of Pettersson's caliber at 26 years old has simply forgotten how to play the game. I think that it's part injury and part between the ears, and both those things can be fixed through different means. So it was going to hurt having that end up being the dressing room, having that rift and something having to happen. Regardless of what they did, they were going to probably take it on the chin. And so I think that they still moved out the right guy. It might just end up being that neither were the right guys to stay.
No, that could be a fair shout as well. Well, a busy week ahead. Cam, thank you for your efforts here. Look forward to next week already.
Thanks, fellas. We'll talk soon.